Welcome to my presentation on cross-cultural communication. I'm Jake Durant, and I'll be your presenter for Organizational Leadership, Class 423, Professor Zacho Smith. Today is October 3rd, 2022. In our presentation, we're going to take a look at defining culture. Low context versus high context. I'll introduce you to some interesting facts on El Salvador, the country chosen for this presentation. Look at some key differences in El Salvador's culture versus the culture of the United States. Look at adjustments needed for successful communication for yours truly. As we discuss culture, it's important that we first begin by defining it. Culture can best be defined as a set of values, behaviors, shared beliefs, and other characteristics that make up a group. It's found in our course book, Barrett 2014. Organizationally, cultures typically refer to the general attitude, personality, and the environment of the organization. In other words, it's the way we do things around here. Next, we'll take a look at the difference between a low context and high context culture. Now that we've defined culture, let's look at the difference between a low context and high context culture. Context is anything around a message that gives it meaning. In low context cultures, we put low value on context, and communication is direct and detailed, task and business focused. There's a strong value on time management. No is seen as an important tool. We say no, we move on to the next task. Individuals are seen as separate from conflict. In order to minimize misunderstandings, communication is very thorough. It is an individualistic culture where every individual is for themselves and their immediate family. A high context culture, such as South America, Central America, China, and Japan, is indirect communication. The relationship focused, time is treated as fluid and flexible. Punctuality is not valued, no is typically not used, and individuals continue to offer objectives. Saving face is a serious consideration. It is a collectivist culture, and everyone is a part of a larger group. As you can see, these differences in cultures can cause some conflicts when conducting business. Now that we've defined culture and context and taken a look at low context and high context cultures, I would like to introduce you to El Salvador, my decision, my choice for this presentation. I'd like to discuss some interesting facts that helps us to better understand why they are a high context culture. El Salvador is the smallest Central American country. It's also the most densely populated, a lot of people in a small area. There are 170 volcanoes in El Salvador, causing the land to be called the land of volcanoes. It also lies in the Pacific Ring, meaning a lot of seismic activity or earthquakes. Population as of 2020 was 6.58 million, and the US dollar is the currency used in El Salvador, making business exchanges between the United States and El Salvador more convenient. There are only two seasons in El Salvador, wet and dry. The majority of the population does not have electricity or running water. Coffee exports account for 90% of the gross domestic product, meaning there's a lot of farming in this country. And is a republic government, where the leaders of the government are voted on, selected, and serve 5-year terms. All this creates a ripe environment for a high context culture, one that is relationship based, and the communication is more indirect. This is a collectivist country. Now that I've introduced you to El Salvador and their high context culture, let's look at some differences between the United States and El Salvador. In the United States, we are a low context culture and we prefer our communication direct. We're very individualistic, each man for himself or woman. Gifts are seen as a form of bribery and can sometimes be illegal. Business meetings are quick and to the point, so we can move on to the next one. Individuals are prone to showing emotion. We're one of the most emotional countries in the world, and there's less importance placed on individuals' title and more on their experience and their ethos or credibility. In El Salvador, they prefer communication direct. They're more focused on family and relationship than they are on business, and they have a low value on punctuality. Oftentimes they will run late. In fact, running early can be seen as rude. It's common to leave gifts and liquor for a host. It's part of the way they do business. Business meetings typically involve dinners or meals and can take much longer than it would in the US to build a relationship. El Salvador is also more relaxed and patient in their approach to business, as again, they're building that relationship. Business dealings are more formal, emotions are not shown, and titles are considered very important in El Salvador. Now that we've looked at the differences in business culture in the United States and El Salvador, I want to look at some personal adjustments that I personally would have to make to do business successfully in El Salvador. First, I'd have to decrease my value on time and punctuality. I prefer to be somewhere on time, and I prefer someone else to be on time. In El Salvador, that value isn't there, and showing up early can actually be seen as rude. I would need to tailor my communication to be more indirect. I prefer direct communication so that I can speak my message and move on to the next one. I also need to realize that business meetings are typically much longer in El Salvador, as they can include meals, and I need to budget my time wisely. I need to focus on building relationships. Rather than jumping into a business agreement, it's important to build that relationship and that trust first. I also need to be careful in showing emotions, as business dealings are kept formal in El Salvador. This requires strong self-awareness and emotional intelligence. I also need to break from the polarized mindset, or as Farrelly tells us in 2009, be flexible in perception, to understand what's important to them and to work with them to create that trust. In conclusion, we've defined culture and context. With the differences between low context and high context cultures, I've introduced you to El Salvador and their high context culture. I've also taken a look at the key differences in the United States and El Salvador's culture, and we've discussed personal adjustments that I would have to make in order to conduct business successfully in El Salvador. Remember, it's important when conducting business overseas or even in your hometown with a different culture to understand their cultural preferences and to take the time to learn about them. This will show them that you respect them and that you want to do business and that you value them. Thank you.